defending my liberal principles has become a conservative position. So I find it easy suddenly to build bridges with people that you know, like Glenn Beck and Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro, that are looking to go, wait a minute, maybe we can find some common ground with liberals. And I often invite a lot of leftists on my show, or progressives, and I get blocked or muted or, you know, otherwise rejected. But I have had some too, and I welcome those conversations.
Tell me about it. I know the feeling. Well, Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report, once called himself a progressive and even worked for a progressive news outlet. Now he says he's fed up with the modern left's autocratic tendencies and cannot endorse them anymore. Dave Rubin joins us from Los Angeles. Dave, thanks a lot for coming on. I wanted to have you on after I saw this amazing video that you did that did go viral, explaining why you're at least shifting. I don't know if you're abandoning all your former beliefs, but you're reorienting for sure. Could you just basically sum up what happened, why you changed your mind?
Yeah, well, you know, first off, actually, I believe the same liberal principles that I've believed probably since around 1988 when Michael Dukakis was running against George H.W. Bush, and I was in a social studies class where we were having a mock election, and I thought liberal was good. I mean, the issue that everybody's talking about, and by the way, I'm glad that I'm doing this tonight and with you, because you're one of the few people in the mainstream that are now talking about this. It's been bubbling up online for quite some time, and the progressive movement is no longer progressive. What progressive would be truly liberal, meaning for the individual, not for the collective, for liberty. I would welcome all your viewers to Google what classical liberalism is. It's about the individual and your right to do with your life what you would like. This is not what the modern left is about. So I actually believe the same exact things that I've believed probably for the last 30 some odd years, and it's the left that has gone crazy. And, you know, I know you know this, but of course on all this free speech stuff and judging everybody on their immutable characteristics. So if you're black, we judge you this way, and if you leave the groupthink, you're a traitor. If you're Muslim, if you're trans, gay, et cetera, these are reverse of liberal beliefs. And it's been very sad to see this. I've been trying to fight this on my show for a good 2 years now. And I suspect we've lost that war in that I've lost the left. But I see an incredible new center developing where people that are liberal are now lining up and going, wait a minute, I see a libertarian who can come to the same agreement that I have. We can believe the same things, just looking at it through a different political lens. So there's a beautiful moment happening here. But of course, it's lost in a big mess of free speech craziness and authoritarian nonsense.
Right. And part of the agreement that might bring people who disagree with each other together is that we're not going to use the legal system against each other if we can help it. So you had this line in here that stuck out at me. You said, I am gay and married. I do not believe that a baker or a florist or any business person ought to be forced to bake a cake for a gay wedding, because if the government can force a company to do something for one set of ideals, they can do it for any. So you see this as a threat to you, potentially.
Well, of course. I mean, look, you know, I should lay out, you know, I'm on Fox News, and I know people will freak out, oh my God, a liberal's on Fox News. So I should give you some liberal cred. Look, I'm for gay marriage. I even married a guy. I'm for legalizing marijuana. I'm pro-choice. I'm for reforming the prison system, and the list goes on and on. As for that specific line, I personally wouldn't want the government telling a private business what to do. Now, a lot of people will say, well, wait a minute, that sounds libertarian. You just want small government libertarianism. Again, this is actually a liberal principle, and I think this is something that most people actually believe. And I know there's a lot of good people that would argue with me and say, well, what if you live in a small town and you know, you have a bigot is your baker in that one town? Unfortunately, I think this is a case where you have to use your foot vote. You have to then take your skills and your family and the money that you bring to the community and move somewhere else, or order a cake online. And I know that doesn't feel right to a lot of people, but that in and of itself, this one person's bigotry shouldn't be an excuse for more government overreach. And again, that is a liberal principle, believe it or not. Yeah.
It is, to the extent possible, you know, in there are cases where you have to, but try not to bother other people too much. That's one way to put it.
Well, that's the funny thing, that live and let live is a liberal principle. And what I've now found over the last couple of years especially is that defending my liberal principles has become a conservative position. So I find it easy suddenly to build bridges with people that you know, like Glenn Beck and Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro, that are looking to go, wait a minute, maybe we can find some common ground with liberals. And I try to find, I often invite a lot of leftists on my show or progressives, and I get blocked or muted or, otherwise rejected. But I have had some too, and I welcome those conversations.
Tell me about it. I know the feeling.
Yeah, I think we're probably
our
on the same boat on that.
Yeah, we are on that. To look up your video online. It's absolutely worth seeing. Thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate it.
I've seen a lot of videos of coming up with that online. Actually, the prequels are good.
Yes, I've been saying it for years.
Is it in comparison to these new ones?
It kind of is, yeah.
Because
it's like at least the prequels don't hate Star Wars. That's the...
They love, but they're also telling you they're telling you a very important story about how to get power and where the desire for power comes from and how you should be wary of political power. I mean, in many ways, they're a really great sort of conservative or libertarian story at some level.
Are you more passionate about the First Amendment or Star Wars?
Well, it's the First Amendment that protects my ability to say these radical things that I say about Star Wars. So.
From a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view,
yeah,
exactly.
I guess.
Exactly. What else is next on your computers over here?
So much, I don't know where to go now.
It's like recalculating.
Yeah.
Recalculating.
We need an AI that tells us what to ask.
Right. He got that one right. Okay.
Little flow chart.
Who are some dream interviews you can get anybody on your show, left or right?
Well, I'd really love to sit down with Bill Maher. I mean, that's the one that I feel like is like missing in my hat, sort of like, because he is that old liberal that you're talking about. Right. He really does get it when it comes to free speech, when it comes to what's happened to the liberals. But he can't, and I think it's partly that the guy's been doing it for 40 years. He's multi-millionaire. He gave $1 million to Obama, so he sort of fully showed his political cards there. But he can't seem to connect that the Democrats are the ones that are destroying all of these cities. So, he'll have Adam Schiff on and be like, all my friends are leaving and Ben Shapiro left and Joe Rogan left. Everyone's leaving California. Why is that? And it's like, well, wait a minute. You've got Schiff right in front of you who raises taxes, does all of the horrible things that destroy this place. So I think that's like a Hollywood thing. He's so in bed with the Hollywood thing. And yet at the same time, when it comes to the main issues, he does get it. And also the Trump thing kind of broke him, which, if Trump had gone after me personally, like him and Trump had their moment personally. So I grant him a little leash with that. But I just think we could really talk it out, but also really argue about like, what would a true liberal do at this moment where the world is splitting? Do you want to just go down with the ship, which is what I think he's doing with the left, or do you want to see what happens with these scary conservatives? And it's fairly obvious which one I'm choosing. I think we'd have a great talk about that.
Yeah, I'd do that.
So you have shed your last vestiges of liberalism. Are you conservative? Are you coming out? Would you like to come out to our audience?
Well, you got a drink? You got some whiskey around here? I know you guys got some whiskey around here.
Some back there?
Well, yeah, I would say anyone sane at this point is conservative. You know what I mean? Like, we might have a couple political disagreements. So I would say I'm still begrudgingly pro-choice, 12 weeks. I'm not denying that it's life. I know that's like a big third rail one for most traditional conservatives. But I think in a pluralistic society, I go into this in the book, you have to have some... people are still going to have abortions in essence either way. And I think it'll end up being only rich people will do it safely. Like there's a whole series of issues there. But look, Rudy Giuliani has been pro-choice for 3 decades and also was at one time the leading Republican candidate for president, way back when. And he's obviously a conservative. So for the minor things that I would say that I have differences with sort of like conservative 101, they're just irrelevant. I want to live in the same country as you guys. I think you want to live in the same country as me. We want to defend the principles that have put us here. And that is worth conserving. And the other guys want to burn it down. So it's like, it's just, the choice is just so obvious to me. It's really as simple as that. And by the way, when I wrote the book and I made that argument about abortion, most of my audience, which is probably more conservative than I am in a traditional sense, the amount of fan letters that I got that people were like, Dave, I love the book. I disagree with you on abortion, but like maybe you'll come to my position in a couple of years. Who knows? Or I can just agree to disagree. Who cares? That's a spirit that I love. And that's obviously has something to do with being conservative.
Yeah. Do you want to live in the same state as us, though?
I feel like you guys should be giving me a score after each answer here, because you look at each other like, okay, how did you do on that one? Did you do okay on that one?
Well, one of the challenges of being a co-interviewers is we don't know if he's going to ask or I'm going to. But you want to follow up?
I do.
Yeah.
I want to ask if you want to live in the same state as us, or if you're going to follow the Daily Wire and go to Nashville.
Yeah, well, you know the story about me and Knowles. Knowles came to my house. We get drunk. We're like, yes, we're going to stay and fight, and we'll take down Gavin Newsom, and we'll save California, and thus we'll save the Union. And then he leaves. It's like 3 a.m. We were like wasted. I wake up at 8 a.m. I open up Twitter. Daily Wire moving to Nashville. Michael Knowles moving. Blah, blah. He told me, he claimed he didn't know. I'll take his word for it. Look, everybody's leaving. I mean, Candace left, obviously. Ben left. You know, Rogan left. I have a lot of other sort of Hollywood type friends that have all gotten out. I think let's see what happens with this recall. I mean, I'm in it at least for now, but at some point the rubber meets the road, and it's like, you know, do you want to live in a place that feels very antithetical to your ideas and values and all of those things, on top of the fact that it obviously makes no financial sense to live here. But I'm okay with that. You know, the thing is, you pay the taxes because the weather is so great. That really is the truth. These last 2 weeks in SoCal, it's been perfect every day. That is worth paying money for. But at some point, if everyone leaves and there's more homelessness everywhere and the drugs are everywhere and the crime is everywhere, then it kind of becomes a little bit tougher.
I, for one, appreciate paying taxes to Gavin Newsom so he can pay reparations.
So he can pay reparations, yeah. God.
Flower bed.
He's guilty over something that is not although he probably has lineage in his family that own slaves, although I wouldn't consider him guilty because of that, because no one's guilty over their parents' or ancestors' actions. I mean, they want you to be born with original sin, these people. They're crazy. But if he wants to pay out of his millions, you know, he's got that winery and he's related to Nancy Pelosi and she's worth a couple $100 million, right? Like, he could pay reparations, but no one in my family owned slaves. And even if they did, I would not be guilty of it.
What about people whose ancestors abolished slavery? Get any points for that?
Nope. Yeah. No. You get nothing. You get nothing, and you're thankful for it.
Dang it. Oh, yeah. We're okay. So,
boy, we still have a lot of time.
I know.
You looked over there. Oh, Jesus, this thing's
We've already talked about the weather.
Gosh, that was rough. I should have looked.
We talked about the weather. We talked about Star Wars.
Star Wars, the weather, moving to Tennessee.
I would go to Florida though if I was going. I would go to Florida. There's so much going on there.
Is there any plans?
Tech-wise, Miami's blowing up tech-wise. I'm going there next week. I'm going to interview the mayor, and he's just like, he's taking the refugees. This guy, he's unbelievable. He's like Schindler. This guy, he's like, I will save all of you. So they leaving San Francisco, and they're all just going down to Miami, and they're building empires down there. And meanwhile, San Francisco is literally wallowing in its own crapulence, to quote C. Montgomery
Can you say
Burns.
that more isolated, like, so we can get it for the podcast intro?
San Francisco is literally wallowing in its own crapulence.
We got it? All right,
What is
got it.
crapulence?
I have no idea.
I stole that from Monty Burns.
Oh, okay.
Monty Burns.
I'm Googling it.
It's wallowing in its own crapulence, Smithers.
All right. What would it take for you to become pro-life or a Christian? This question was added here. I didn't write that.
Who wrote that?
I think it was Dan.
Dan.
So did you just ask the hardcore question and then back away?
Yeah, it's
totally back to
interesting.
it. I wipe my hands of this.
I'm fascinated by your interview style. Two people, they constantly look at each other. You might be typing to each other in the middle of this thing. I don't know what the hell's going on here.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Rubin Report. And I'm not Rubin. I'm Larry King, and I will be interviewing Dave Rubin. Welcome to your show.
This is wild. Larry King guest hosting my show from his studio.
And
is
I'm very nervous, David. It's all new to me, and it's just it's spine-tingling.
Yeah, this must be very exciting. I mean, you've interviewed everybody, but this has got to be...
For me...
Pretty much...
the tops.
This is
a thrill.
What would you say, like Dalai Lama? Top 3?
Dalai Lama? Oh, no. Dolly's way down.
Dolly's down there? I just want to know if I cracked the top 3, basically. So who are the top 2?
I'll pick one from entertainment would be Sinatra.
All right, Sinatra, that's respectable.
And one from the political world, 7 presidents.
All the presidents, yeah. And now Dave Rubin.
And Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report.
But you're freaking out right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. I'm nervous about it. Were you a nerdy kid who was interested in politics when he was 6 years old?
You know, I always thought that I was right between cool and nerd. I remember around 6th grade or something thinking that it was going to be work to be cool. Like the cool kids, to be around the cool kids. Because I never felt cool. And I was always, I was into science and video games and board games and all that stuff. But I played sports too. But I remember thinking it would be hard. It would be effort to be with the cool kids all the time. And I knew I would never be at the top of that thing. So I kind of hung out with the nerds and I loved it. I literally, I kid you not, I did not touch a sip of alcohol or smoke weed or a cigarette or anything in high school. I was up with my friends playing video games every night.
Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Brooklyn, just like my esteemed interviewer, and I grew up in Long Island and lived in Manhattan for most of my adult life until I moved to LA 4 years ago. So I'm a true coast to coast guy.
What'd your father do?
My dad was is in sales for women's clothing. He's in the schmata biz.
In schmata biz in New York. Yeah. When did you get interested in politics?
I think probably around 7th grade. I think it was 1988 was the Dukakis versus George H.W. Bush. And I remember we were doing like a mock election in my social studies class. And I remember George H.W. Bush had said to Dukakis, "You're a liberal." And Dukakis said, "I'm no liberal," or something to that effect. And I remember thinking, this doesn't make any sense to me. Liberals are the good guys. Why would you be afraid of saying you're a liberal? And that was really my awakening to sort of being a liberal, which to me meant looking out for other people. It meant caring about the other and trying to make sure that we have some sort of cohesive society and not being truly racist or bigoted or any of that stuff. I think what's happened to the word liberal, especially in the last couple of years, as I talk about on my show, has really changed. But I've always been interested in politics. I was a poli-sci major, so I may be the only person in America who got a poli-sci degree and is actually using it for something.
Did you want to get into the realm of running for office?
Yeah, I did. Actually, at first, I thought I would go into politics. And I remember I was in a politics class, I think my junior year of college. I went to SUNY Binghamton. So I came through the state system and, didn't have to spend a ton on college. And that's why I'm very much for, state-funded education. And I remember being in a class about public policy, and the professor, every day we'd be in there, he would talk about how nothing works the way it's supposed to be. The system just doesn't function the way it is. And I kind of remember thinking, this doesn't seem right. Who would want to be part of this system? And I think a lot of people feel that way, which is why, it's really why we end up with such corrupt candidates, because who would ever, would you ever, in your whole lifetime, would you have ever wanted to go through that machine?
Well, the best
lies
of us,
and all of that, yeah.
Esquire did a great article years ago on 100 people who would be great presidents, and you don't know them.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Because the best of us doesn't run.
Yeah, and it just seems so obvious now. And look, we can talk about Trump and Clinton and that whole thing, but it's like we got somebody in office who, I've been saying, I think this might be good now. I think there's some opportunity. I wonder about his moral center. And, as I was just saying to you in the green room, I think he's a populist, not an ideologue. So maybe there's a way that the population can actually push him to do good things as opposed to an ideologue who really believes something that could potentially be scary. So I think there's opportunity there. But look what he had to do to become president. Crooked Hillary and Little Marco and Lyin' Ted and all this stuff that has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with, for 50 years that you've been talking to all of these incredible people.
How many issues were really discussed?
There was build a wall, right? Which now I think he's backtracking a little on. Or, deport these people. Now he's backtracking on some of that stuff, which I think is actually fine. But all of this stuff, it's like, it doesn't feel like we had an election. It feels like we had a popularity contest.
So you chose, rather than getting into the game, talking about the game, asking about the game, looking at the game.
I think that, well, for me, and I'm talking to the right guy now, that concept of figuring out why people think the way they think, like just sitting across from somebody and really trying to not grill them. Actually, I'll give you a question here, which is sometimes people say to me, Dave, you do too many softball interviews. And my policy on interviewing is I want to watch them hang themselves. So
I want to learn, and I want to get it the best way I can.
Yeah.
And the dumbest way to learn is to scream at someone or to attack them or to make them defensive.
Yeah.
If you want to learn, like someone said, if someone asked me, if you were going to interview Saddam Hussein or the guy who bombed 9/11, I would have said to him, "You were from one of the richest families in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Why'd you leave?" See, I want to get at him. I also knew a long time ago that no one evil thinks they're evil. So you don't comb your hair in the morning. Hitler didn't comb his hair and say, "I am a terrible person."
Right. He thought he was doing pretty great stuff.
Right. So you have to come at him from the angle until you get to,
Yeah.
you know, like I used to interview racists, you know, like George Wallace when he was governor before he changed. And I talk about the pigment of skin. What is it about the pigment of skin
Yeah.
that would cause you to think differently about a person?
Yeah.
Why do you buy tanning lotion?
Right. And isn't that much more interesting than just the minutia of the day-to-day machine? You know, I think that is what the people are upset with more than anything else. They're sick of what cable news has done to us. This
Breaking news.
They're breaking news literally. I mean, they're breaking the way news should be delivered to us, and people are tired of that. This idea of outrage culture that we're in very much. Every morning you wake up and you can look at Twitter and figure out a thousand reasons that people are outraged. And then at the end of the day, it's like they're reporting on, it's like you've got all these reporters, and what are they doing? They're waiting for Trump to tweet. They're just waiting for him to say something so they can write a piece about it and they can be outraged. And that's not news. And it's also, it's not even good for your brain. It's not good for your ability to do this, to just calmly for however long sit in front of somebody, hear you respond. That's what we need. And
you enjoy it, don't you? And you got to leave your ego at the door.
I try to. I really try to. I mean, to me, when I have a good interview and the hour finishes, I learn something, which is pretty great. And I would say almost every week I've learned something, maybe not something good. Maybe I thought, well, you know, that guy said something really crazy and I don't buy that. But I've had interviews. I had Larry Elder on my show, who I'm sure you know Larry.
Oh,
and Larry is
he can frustrate you.
Larry, it was when I was doing my show here at Aura, and he was in this very room, and he was really pushing me. I was talking about systemic racism, and he was really pushing me on it. What is systemic about it? He wasn't saying racism doesn't exist, but built into the system, and really pushed me on it, and has changed my views a little bit on how it works. And you know, he gets a ton of crap because he's a black conservative, so he's thought of as the other, and he's treated really terribly by a lot of the black community.
Self-hating.
Self-hating, and he's an Uncle Tom and all this stuff. So I'll have him on, and then I'll have, you know, somebody like Mike Cernovich, who's thought of as an alt-right guy. And you know, either way, I like having those conversations. It's like, how would you learn if you only listen to people that you agree with? Yeah. I have no idea.
You're not kidding. Do you, when you see a race like we just had, do you get turned off from the game?
Man, it's wild, because this whole last 2 years, it's been exhilarating for me in a certain way. And the fact that I got to know you in these last 2 years and bring my show here and now do it independently. So it's been a good 2 years for me, sort of professionally and personally and all that. There are times when it's exhilarating. There are times when you really feel like you're in something. And you know, it's like when you're talking to people that are actually really saying something, not the interviews that happen every now and again where, you know, the guest isn't really offering something. They're either promoting something or they're just saying more of nothing for publicity's sake, right? But sometimes you talk to somebody and you go, wow, this is an idea that could actually change people. So it's been exhausting. I think everybody's kind of exhausted right now. We're having this weird time in America right now where people can't believe it. Like, it happened, the Trump thing happened. I was on Joe Rogan's show the day before the election, and I said, I think this thing's 50-50. I really believe that the whole time. The Trump people were excited and the Hillary people were begrudgingly voting for her or not voting, and that's what happened. But it's exciting, and it's also exhausting, because I don't know that this is exactly how politics is supposed to be. You know, to me, a good political system would be one that we don't have to talk about it that often. How do you beat the mob? Well, the mob actually preys on the fact that people are afraid. And I think there's a lot of people that think, oh, if I could just I can sit this one out. Let me just sit this one out. Let me be quiet this time. It'll pass. It'll pass. It doesn't pass. That's the thing. They have preyed on the fact that good people are good people. And they have used that against us, and it's the frog in the boiling pot. if you think that your acquiescence or that your silence is saving you, you're actually turning the dial up on the pot that you are in. And as you know, it does not end well for the frog, right? Like that frog is fried at the end of that thing. Yeah. And I think that that is what has happened here. And that in many ways is why I wanted to write the book more than anything else, because that was the idea. It was like, I don't think that everything I present here is the most legendary political idea of all time. But I think I've been able to communicate ideas in a good way, and I've paid the price for that.
And there are rewards.
Absolutely.
Based on the price you paid, too.
And I don't say paid the price to get any pity points. I don't want any pity points. I've gotten the rewards of that, too, right? Yeah. Like, it's awesome. It's cool. I wake up and I'm ready to go every day, you know?
How do you feel like we can emotionally arm ourselves for taking on backlash? Because if we want to be great in our lives at any stage, any decade of our life, there's going to be critics, haters, backlash, mob, whether it's online, offline, whatever. What do you think we can do emotionally to prepare for that? Besides, what I think is the best thing is just to do it as often as possible, to be able to stomach it and say, okay, I'm still alive, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't kill me, it hurts, but I'm stronger.
Well, partly it's that. Partly it's that. Partly it's basketball's been a theme here. So, like, partly it's why did Michael Jordan practice harder than anybody else, right? Like, that is the known thing. Kobe was like it too. It's like, why did they do it? Barkley didn't love practice. Allen Iverson famously, practice, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not to say they weren't great players, but Allen Iverson and Charles Barkley never won championships. And Michael Jordan won 6 championships, and he was in the finals 6 times, right? And he systematically eliminated every one of his peers to get there. So partly it's just that. You gotta, you know, Douglas Murray, who I've had on my show, who's a brilliant conservative political thinker from the UK and one of the greatest writers that I think we have in modern times. He said to me once, he said, you know, if you get in the pool, he said, in a British accent, if you dip your toe in the pool, you might find out that the water's not that cold. And I actually think that that's the right idea. We you know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's something like that, that we create these monsters, and then when you actually go ahead and do whatever you're supposed to do, you might step in the pool and be like, damn, I thought the water was gonna be freezing, but it turns out it's 92.
It's fresh,
yeah. And that's not to say it's gonna be perfect, because trust me, it won't be. You will lose friends. I mean, we've all been through versions of this. People that you love will suddenly say the worst things about you. You'll watch, I'm seeing some of this now. I'm getting a lot of support from my sort of right-leaning friends, so you know, Shapiro and Peterson and Glenn Beck and Dennis Prager, that crew. A lot of my lefty guys who have been with me all along the road have completely abandoned me because they don't want to just deal with any of the backlash. And I also think this is a whole other topic, but I think that goes to a little bit of the lefty mind, which is in constant protection mode. That's like sort of like a whole separate thing, but you got to get in. Get in the game, because the game is coming for you anyway. Whether you like, you can say I'm not playing. But it's what we talked about with politics before. The game is being played, man. That's like saying, you know, if we were looking at a chessboard, it's like you are one of the pieces, whether you like it or not. And if the whole board is being shifted around, well, you got to move with it.
How do you handle interviewing someone or sitting down with someone who has every opposite belief than you, who is so firm in their beliefs on whatever opinion they have, they hate everything that you love?
Yeah.
How do you sit and listen to someone with an opposing view on everything about your life and your beliefs and not let it affect you and hurt you?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
So I can give you 2 examples of this. I'll give you one on the left and one on the right, because because the premise that you're asking could apply to no matter where you fall, right? So on the left, I interviewed Marianne Williamson. You know her, right? The Democratic candidate. So I interviewed her, and as I was interviewing her, lovely lady.
Yeah.
Maybe a little out there, that's fine too. That was part of the magic. But what I realized about 20 minutes into the interview is we had a fundamental impasse on how we view the world. She's a collectivist, and I'm an individualist. She believes sort of in collective guilt. So she had just done this thing a few weeks earlier in a church.
About the,
you saw this?
About the slavery, about the...
and that she had the white people in the church go up to the black people and touch them and basically apologize. And it's like, I don't believe you're guilty for your father's sins, your grandfather's sins, much less no one in my family owned slaves. That's not to say that we should not realize that obviously slavery was a horrible thing and all of those things. But I don't believe in collectivism, that white people are suddenly guilty of something or black people inherently are not guilty of something or guilty of something. I just don't believe the world operates like that. I believe the world operates, you are responsible for your thoughts and actions. Now, she obviously viewed the world in a very different way, and that's very obvious in all of her policies and all of the things that she was putting forth. And I realized as an interviewer in that moment, I thought I could let her say whatever she wants, and I will, and I'll treat her respectfully. But if I don't stop right now and announce we just have a fundamental difference on how we view the world, then everyone's going to look at me and be like, Dave, everything she said up there for an hour is completely against what you say, but you just let her say it. So I felt the best way to deal with that was to just make the announcement. Just make the announcement. We just view the world differently.
There you go. Not making her wrong or making her bad or whatever.
Do I believe that my view of the world is closer to something that will ultimately free people? Absolutely. But it's not interesting to me to bring on people to just attack them. I'm not interested in doing that. Someone else can do that. That's fine. It's not what I want to do.
You're more of a neutral, like me.
It's because this is how you get. It's very obvious to me that you don't have an agenda with me. You're actually trying to find out what I think. That's much more in line with my kind of interview.
Than trying to gotchas.
And by the way, man, I say this all the time. If a million, I was kind of early on the long form interview thing on YouTube. But if a gajillion other people start being out there doing it better than me, I will find other things to do. Like, I really liked writing the book. I like doing public stuff and talking to the camera and tours and all that. So that's why it's like I never feel a competition in any of these things. It's like, man, if you blow up, it's like, that's awesome. Cool. Like, you're doing something good. I really mean that. Like, that's cool. Like, I can do other things. I wanted to be in the NBA. It's too late. But,
Exactly.
But I'll give you the right version of that as well, which was I had this guy by the name of Stefan Molyneux on. Do you know who he is? So he's a YouTube guy who's become a bit of a cult figure, and he talks a lot about race realism and sizes of brains and all of this stuff that I was never particularly interested in. It's not my thing. There's a twang of what feels like genuine racism in it. Like, I don't even mean that he himself is racist per se, but if you're obsessed with that topic, it always strikes me as like a little bit weird. And it was one of the only interviews that I've ever done, maybe literally the only one I've ever done, where I actually called a couple people to ask for advice on how to go about doing this. Because I wanted to treat him respectfully, the same way I would treat everybody else, but I also wanted to make sure I wasn't...
not getting attacked by the world for...
Well, I knew that was going to happen no matter what. I knew that either way was going to happen, right? But so I talked to a couple people, and I felt that I dealt with the interview correct. My driving point in the interview was I kept saying to him, I think I said it 3 times, why do you care about this? Why do you care about whether there are racial differences related to brain size and IQ? Like what? And I don't know that he gave me an answer that perfectly answered it for me, but I also think as an interviewer, if I'm never to touch, I'm sure you have your own version of this, if I'm never to touch the people that are on the fringes, then what will happen is the fringes will keep getting tighter and tighter. You know what I mean? Like, we'll keep getting a slimmer and slimmer version of who we can talk to. And, it's sort of like the Alex Jones thing. It's like, listen, Alex Jones may be a nutbag. He may be really a WWE-style wrestler more than a political pundit, or he may be half actor and half conspiracy theorist. It doesn't even matter what he is. But the idea that this was the guy that we had to take out online, I'm not defending anything he said. I'm not lauding it or defending it. I'm just saying when they do this coordinated assault to just eliminate somebody, what they did is they made him more popular. I've heard from people on the inside that he's actually making more money than he's ever made before because they drove his core fans to him, right? To however he makes money. I'm not even sure that is. Maybe it's through his website or whatever. They drove it all to him. So instead of giving the YouTube rev and which is pretty crappy, and the CPMs and all that nonsense. So I'm just a believer that for guys like us, we have to do our best to talk to some people that maybe aren't loved by everybody, and then survive the slings that'll come with it. It's just what you got to do, or get it into another line of work.
That's it. If you can't stomach it,
If you can't,
I hear you.
Yeah.
I try to. I try to really make sure that I'm never like attacking someone or anything like that when I'm interviewing them. It's really trying to pull the best out of them and make sure that also that I'm not saying this is also what I believe in. So I think that's good that you do that.
But because that's the tricky part, because sometimes someone will say something that everyone knows that I think is wrong or the wrong
Right,
idea.
right.
And it's like, I don't feel it's like
You
sometimes
don't need
I'll
to
push
constantly
them.
justify, yeah.
I don't see, that's the thing. I don't want to justify myself. I may push them and say, well, I don't really understand. I mean, if you keep giving money to the thing that you say doesn't work,
Yeah.
maybe that's not going to work, something like that. Well, that you can do that. But then it gets to a point where it's like, if they came on my show, which is in my home,
Yeah, literally.
it is literally in my home. I'm not there to destroy them. And as far as I know, no one has been killed because of any of the ideas that have been put forth on the Rubin Report.
Kind of on the tangent then about talking about liberalism and progressivism in general, and sort of you've often spoken about how these two ideologies have changed and how they've almost become a race to, I think, what you coined as the highest rate to victimhood. What do you think is actually driving this change?
Look, the ideas of identity politics, as I said, where you judge people on their immutable characteristics. So, for example, we just met 10 minutes ago. I don't know what your background is. I can only look at you and I can ascertain a few things. But if I was to think, okay, your skin is darker than mine, I should know what your politics are, or I should know literally anything about you other than you strike me as a very thoughtful person and I'm enjoying this conversation, that would be insane. I mean, that would be insane, but they've tricked us. In a modern sense, the left has tricked us to say, okay, if you're gay, you're a little oppressed, but if you're a white gay guy, you're a little less oppressed than a black gay guy. And then if you're a Muslim, you're oppressed this much, and if you're trans, you're oppressed this much. And then there's this idea that I'm sure most of you guys know about intersectionality, that somehow, if we can combine all of these oppressions, it's like you're creating some sort of super transformer that will be stronger together. Like Devastator. I'm glad that reference worked on you guys. Wow, all right. I'd rather talk about the Transformers, but we can do this. But they think that by taking all of these oppressed groups, that what you can do is you can mix them all together and that you'll have some sort of superpower. But you will actually have the reverse, because if you view your victimhood as virtue, you will always want to be more of a victim than anyone else. And victimhood, guys, this is probably the most important thing that I'll say this entire time. Victimhood is not virtue. Yes, some of you grew up with more. Some of you have a limp. Some of you are gay. Some of you are black. Whatever it is, it does not matter. What you are supposed to do as a human is take charge of your life. Figure out what your, can I curse? Shit is. Figure it out. Figure out what your shit is, and then go, all right, Look, everyone in this room, I would guarantee you that almost without exception, but please correct me if I'm wrong in the Q&A, that almost every single one of you have it better than your grandparents had, and certainly better than their parents had and before that. That's real progress. But it's not progress because it magically happened. It's progress because freedom has taken root here, and that is an incredibly beautiful thing. So all the government should do is facilitate to make sure that there are equal laws for everybody, that you don't get to take more from some people because they had a little bit easier, or give more to some people because they had a little bit harder. Now, there's ways we can address some of those things. I would say that the way to address real inequalities are that we should be funding the best education we can fund. That, to me, is the only answer. But the idea that we're going to punish certain people, or I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with the lawsuit that James Damore has over at Google. I mean, they literally were putting it in HR handbooks that they were not going to hire white or Asian engineers. Really think about that. You're going to say, because of someone's skin color or ethnicity, we are not going to hire them. Now, I get it. The idea behind that was we'd like to help other people who maybe have been underrepresented as engineers, and that's a lofty idea, and it sort of sounds like progress. We're going to hire people who have been underrepresented. But what you actually start accomplishing is that you will hire people not only who are less qualified, because you're going to say, we're going to have to take people who are less qualified, if in this case, the white and Asian engineers were the most qualified. And any business, hopefully you guys will all have great businesses when you get out of here, if you want to have a great business, or you'll be in academia or whatever else you want to do, but you're going to want to hire the best people, not because of their skin color. That is prejudice. Imagine if you had a heart attack tomorrow. Would you want the best doctor, or would you want a doctor based on some immutable characteristic that got him the job, that probably also got him into the college before that and perhaps the school before that? Of course the answer is no. That's the honest answer. It's a tough answer, but that's the honest answer. So I would say the way to deal with some of the inequalities is through education, but this positioning of of that our victimhood will make us stronger together is actually, especially for America, which I think has done multiculturalism better than any Western society in the history of the world, where everyone, this is a funny thing, we get this out of the left all the time, how much they hate America, and then they also want open borders, so I guess everyone could share in the horror that is America. And it's just, it's patently ridiculous. And we should want equal laws for everybody, and then within that is what empowers you as an individual to go out and get what's yours. It doesn't mean you're gonna get it, but you should have every opportunity to get it, and then the rest is on you. And any other system that's gonna try to rejigger some things so that it's gonna be easier for these people and less easy for these, and try to magically make a perfect society. As Eric Weinstein said on my show, every time a society has tried for utopia, it gets dystopia.
Then kind of on that tangent, the idea that education could be the first step to a more equal society, how would you then navigate the problem that comes with an educational institution? For example, Oxford, one could argue, where BME students are underrepresented when it comes to the application process. If it's not through then schemes that encourage these communities to apply, how do you suggest to navigate around that issue?
Yeah. So I don't know about that specific example, so I don't want to comment on that. But what I would say is that we shouldn't be looking, look, if you took the entire country here and you were to break it down by ethnicity or whatever, or sexuality or whatever, imagine if those quotas were really what got you guys to school. Some of you would not be here right now. Would that be fairer? I don't think that would be fairer. What you would want to do, I think, is you want to get education to be at the most local level possible, but really good education, not just teaching for the test so that people can move higher up and so they can memorize certain stats, or I'm sure all of you guys did this in high school. You would ask your teacher, well, do I have to know years or something? Like, do I have to, and it's like, that's not what an education is. What you have to try to do, I think, is get as much. You want to use money effectively so that schools actually are teaching logical thinking critical thinking more than anything else. And then, yes, may it turn out at the end of that, if everyone had basically the same access, school choice is a great example, and vouchers. People should have as much access to good education. And by the way, this is somewhere where I think the government does have a role. So there's a lot of libertarians, obviously, that don't want the government in education at all. I would say that I'm the product of public education, for better or worse, and I went to good grade school, and I went to good junior high and a blue ribbon high school, and I went to the State University of New York at Binghamton, all public schools. So I know it can work. I studied politics, so something must have gone right here, So I think you have to reform it to the point where we shouldn't have federal bureaucracies like the Department of Education that's trying to impose just massive. We have, in America, for example, we have about, 350 million people, 400 million people. You have to kick that back to the states and let the states decide what's best. And then the counter argument I always get to that, by the way, is that, people will say, well, wait a minute, if you took a state like, a southern state like Alabama, well, they'd want to teach creationism. Well, perhaps they would, but I would argue that as time goes forward, I believe that the truth does win out. And that the more opportunity you give, if the states are actually a marketplace, which is what the founders in America wanted, the more that, you go, some of the Connecticut in the north, they've really respected science and education and all that. I'm just picking a state. You're going to get more people moving there, and then Connecticut might raise taxes, and then more people are going to go, I don't want to pay those taxes for that education, and they might move to Texas, and then they'll get to Texas, and the taxes will be low, but they'll go, all right, my taxes are low, but my education's not great, but I have more land here. And then it's on you. This is the true beauty of the American system, is that you can use, as Randy Barnett, who's been on my show as a constitutional law professor at Georgetown, and he's argued in front of the Supreme Court, he said, you can use your foot vote. If you don't like what is happening in your community, go somewhere else. But the second the federal government starts making laws for everybody, if you don't like it, you got to leave the country. And that's much worse. So again, this is where I would always go to local control of things.
On then talking about educational institutions, I think now more than ever on college campuses, the idea of safe spacing and not platforming is a buzzword that's very prominent. Would you ever not host a speaker, for example?
Well, I think everyone has a right to free speech, and I hope during the Q&A you guys are welcome to ask me anything that you'd like. I don't think everyone has a right to a platform, or I know that not everyone has a right to a platform. You don't have to invite anyone here, and you don't have to sit here to listen to anyone. So that's up to the organization. Now, I would say that a school, a public school especially, private schools it's a little bit different, but in effect, if a public school invites, if a student group invites somebody, then the school has a responsibility to make sure that event can happen peacefully, and that protest, of course, is allowed. Protest is the most free thing that there is. You are supposed to use your voice to express your thoughts. But you can't violently protest, you can't call in bomb threats, you can't pull fire alarms, you can't create human walls to not let other students in. These are all things that happened to me when I spoke at UCLA with Milo. Now again, Milo is intentionally a provocateur, so I don't agree with all of the things that he says, absolutely. But if the student group decided that he can speak, it's incumbent on the university to protect his free speech. And so this idea of safe spaces and trigger warnings, look, they can, again, I'm a freedom guy. They can do whatever they want. If you guys have a room of puppies or whatever is out there, like, great. Well, great, I guess it's not great, but you can have your room of puppies. I'd like to see the room of puppies, but in effect, what you're doing is actually the reverse of why you guys are here. You are here to learn how to think. This is what an incredible school you're at. I mean, just in the hour that I've been here, I mean, this is truly incredible, and I hope you guys really understand that. And if they take away your ability to hear different thoughts in school, you don't magically get braver. You don't magically get smarter when you work out, you get into the real world. Now you got a job and you got kids and a partner or whatever you got. You're not going to magically also go, now I should challenge my mind intellectually. You won't. Do it here now. And the more people that are trying to protect you from scary ideas, they're actually not protecting you. They're sheltering you. And if anything, they're really trying to control you. So not everybody has a right to speak. Well, everyone has a right to speak, but not everyone has a right to speak here. It's up for you guys to make wise choices. And in the cases where maybe you invite somebody that some of the people here aren't happy with, they can protest. But I would say more importantly, come listen and make a good point in the Q&A and show this person why they're wrong. But just shouting them down actually strengthens all the bad forces out there.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.